all you have to do is tell me.
You need help. That's what I'm talking about. All right.
Good job.
You gotta let that gas out. Oh my God.
What's up, folks? Welcome to another episode of the Shired podcast with DP. I am your host, Des Pop, aka Jay Simino, and what better way to start off a Monday than with that amazing opening timeline cleanse. Farts are funny in any language. You're welcome. Before we go any further, please obey my rules. Follow any accounts I showcase. Have fun or F the hell off. So I decided for today's show, it was time for you all to get to know DP, and what better way to do that than with a new segment called Case Files. When I was at the gym this morning, I had YouTube playing through my earbuds and it was set to music. And then for some reason, it cut into a news story from around a year ago. And that story was from my former home where I was a member of law enforcement for 24 years. In fact, the highlighted story was a homicide that I worked. I wasn't watching the video, I was just listening to it. And it was explaining the story of a case where a suspect was being sentenced for life. I heard the name and thought, that name sounds familiar. And then they were describing the case and the year and how it took 6 years to get to trial, and it hit me. I was on that case. I was assigned as the secondary, and it was a doozy. So in my department there were always two detectives called in for each homicide. One was the primary, or as Hollywood would call it, lead detective, and the other was the secondary. Both worked the case the same way, but you couldn't have a single detective out there looking for suspects or witnesses who were often themselves standoffish and combative, because the streets don't talk. The only difference between the two detectives was the primary carried the package, meaning they carried the case file all the way through to trial. And without getting into it, that was heavy work. Whoever held the package was under a great deal of responsibility. They were in constant contact with the assigned prosecutors, morning, noon, and night, and a case could go as long as, in this case, 6 years. So I was a go-to guy. I like to think that it was because of the work I put in and the results I produced, but it was also because I answered the fucking phone every time it rang. A lot of guys wouldn't pick up the phone when they were up for a case, so rather than the department hold them to account, they just called the next guy on the list. Until it got to a point where they would just skip the entire list and call me first. In fact, it was a major reason why I retired at 46. I had around 24 years on the job at that point. In and around October 2020 was when I left, and I still had a full tank and could still be working today, but I was burnt out. And they were absolutely responsible for that because the bosses didn't have the balls to hold the lazy ones to account. So in the summer of 2019, my divorce had just finalized, and I hadn't been on a vacation since 2011, I think, when I took my son to Disney. I had a side gig at the time working for a major cigar company. That was going to be my retirement, actually. I was going to go straight into that. I was the New England rep, and the week of my birthday, there was a major event in Jersey being held for that cigar company. I was invited, and again, a month after my divorce, I was itching to get back out there, giggity. So I told my bosses, my sergeant, lieutenant, and captain, I told them I was due for a getaway, and it would be this particular weekend. They knew I'd be gone and promised not to call me in. So I get to this party, about 4 hours away. It's held at a Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous MTV Cribs kind of mansion. And I'm in the pool, about 4 premium gin and tonics deep. It's about 100 degrees, and the pool is full of single bitches. I'm in the low end, drink in hand, phone on the concrete apron beside me. It rings at around 1:30 in the afternoon, and I see it's my captain. Any other detective would have put it to voicemail, but sometimes they just call him with a question. He knew I was gone, so there's no way he's calling me in, right? Motherfucker. Hey, Jay, how's it going down there? That's how he talked. Good guy, by the way. He obviously knows I'm not home. I'm a 4-hour drive away from home. Sup, Cap? What's going on? Yeah, how long did you say you'd be out there? I'm coming home tomorrow, Cap. Why? What's up? We got a bad one, man. I was wondering if maybe you canceled and were still around. Well, Cap, if you hear the music and the bitches and the splashing in the background, I'm far away in a pool with a full ass erection. Oh, there's no way you're coming back early? Sorry to bother you. I know you told us about this weekend, but the major is, yeah, he's the major. Yeah, my major. The head of detectives didn't take no for an answer. It could have been my fucking wedding day, and he still would have had the captain call. The major could have been in attendance at my wedding, and he still would have called me. So I explained, sorry, Cap, it's been years since I got out, and I need this. All right, man, I had a call, so I could tell him no go. Oh, day goes on, I party and drink all damn day and night. It's about 10:30 at night. Captain calls me again. I pick up the phone. I don't even say hello. I'm like, what the fuck, Cap? Another one? He's like, nah, same one. We couldn't get anyone else to run secondary. No one answered the phone. And again, in my view, no one answered the phone because the bosses didn't make them. You were handed a department-issued cell phone the moment you got the promotion to detectives for the sole purpose of answering it every single time it rang. No excuses. So I end the call, and now I'm seething. I honestly feel disrespected at this point. And around 1 a.m., I retire up to my room because I was given a room in this palace for the night, and I couldn't close my eyes. I was so pumped and angry. Before the sun came up, and I was probably still cocked, although I didn't feel it due to my enraged adrenaline. And I get in the car, and I drive the 4 hours back. I go straight to the homicide scene with full intent on going off on all the bosses, and I was that guy. But as soon as I walk in, I go, whoa, you were right. What the fuck? This is a bad one. It was my first beheading. But this wasn't just any beheading. This poor guy was beheaded with a spade shovel. So we start working it, and we had nothing to go on. The victim was just a poor Pakistani immigrant. His torso is here, his cabeza is off to the left, and we had nothing to go on. This guy was the only member of his entire family here in America, and he worked overnights at the 7-Eleven. Figures, right? It's about a block away. And when he didn't show up for work that night, an employee walked over to his house and found him that way. And while we were still there, some guy walks into the crime scene, also Middle Eastern. He identifies himself as the landlord. And through him, we get the victim's name and backstory, and we ask him, does this guy have any enemies, or was he having any problems at all? And the landlord says, funny you mentioned that. Yesterday, he calls me, and he says there's some guy in his apartment. So I told him, what do you want me to do? Just call the police. And so we asked the landlord, did he call back to say how it ended or anything? Did he say who the guy was or what he looked like? And the landlord opens his phone and says, oh, it looks like he texted me yesterday also. There's 2 unopened images in his phone. The first image is of a black male from behind. The male's in a backyard with his back to the victim, with his head kind of turned around, like looking back. And what we learned later on from the suspect was that he was startled by the guy, thinking the apartment was empty, and he left with no confrontation. But apparently, after the victim called his landlord, he decided, based on his landlord's advice to call police, that he should get a pic of the suspect. So as the suspect is walking away, and he's outside the house at this point, the victim calls out to him. And when the suspect turns his head towards the phone, he takes the pic. So the landlord closes out the pic and opens the next one. And the next pic is creepy. Now the suspect is in the victim's face with his hands out like this. What the ever love and fuck. That's gotta be our guy. They're standing in the opening of the back door of the building in that photo, and right beside the back door is a spade shovel. The suspect grabs it, and the fight is on. The suspect had no criminal history. In this case would have been very tough to solve, but somehow, as the victim is being attacked, he's able to send the images to his landlord. The guy doesn't know what 911 is. He doesn't speak a word of English. He only knew to send the images to his landlord. So later, when we identify the suspect, we get him in, and he gives a full confession. Dude is ape shit crazy. And he explains that he knocks the guy out with the shovel and then begins just jamming the pointed part into the dude's neck over and over and over again until his head is completely removed. There was also a lot of damage to the victim's right shoulder, I believe, as well. And I think the primary detective asked him during the confession, what's going on with the shoulder? And the suspect says he was planning on just dismembering the entire body, but he got real tired. And I think he may have said that he grabbed some food from the fridge and ate right there. And just to give a visual, the victim is lying right there in the kitchen with the suspect. And after eating, he leaves, and the rest is history. The news report I listened to this morning stated that the suspect got life plus 10 years, deservedly so. I had no idea until I heard the story today. As homicide detectives, we do have to carry our cases even in retirement because only we can testify to our work, but I was the secondary, so I didn't carry the package, and I had no idea what had even happened to the case later on. I retired like a year later, so I didn't stay caught up. I changed my phone number and I gave it to a few select prosecutors that I still had pending cases with. All of them ended up pleading out anyway. So anyway, that was Case Files with DP. Now let's end as we always do with a timeline cleanse from someone who appears to be just as psychotic as my suspect in the spade shovel beheading. Later, bitches.
Been at war with a mouse for 3 months. His body was identified at 7:53 a.m. How'd you do it, Zach? How'd you fight against nature and win? Simple. Had to get into the mind of the little motherfucker. Covered myself in peanut butter and crawled across my kitchen floor for 14 hours straight. He didn't stand a chance.
Get him, Jay.
I'm not a cop.
You got DP'd.